At Total Pharmacy Care, we fill your prescriptions and answer any questions about your medications. No distractions and no long lines. Tell your doctor to send your prescriptions to Total Pharmacy Care.
All right, we're back. It's All Mountain Football Edition. Not an easy week, but before we get into the All Mountain Football selection, we'll just go ahead and tell you about our sponsors. We're sponsored by Bruce Waters. Bruce Waters has just updated their pricing on all their new inventory. Check them out at brucewatersford.net.
We're also brought to you by Presbyterian Homes of Cedar Creek. If you're looking for quality care for your loved ones, look no further than Presbyterian Homes of Cedar Creek and Good Shepherd. Both facilities treat your loved ones with care and respect. They offer therapy, daily activities, exquisite cuisine, and home-like settings to make your family members feel at home. Call to schedule an appointment today. At Cedar Creek, call my wife, Jessica Thacker, at 432-8243, and at Good Shepherd, call 456-8725. Caring for your loved ones is what we do best.
All right, guys, it's flu season, and the professional pharmacists at Nova Pharmacy and Caremore Pharmacy want you off. I messed up.
Keep going. I like how this is going. Let's run this back. Now go.
It's flu season, and the professional pharmacists at Nova Pharmacy and Caremore Pharmacy want you to get vaccinated. Call Joel and Sandy Thornberry today and get vaccinated and stay healthy. 606-432-2274 is the Nova Pharmacy, and Caremore would be 639-2273. Yeah.
I think he deserves a round of applause. That's a pro.
You're just happy I messed up.
I know. I've been waiting for that for a lot of episodes now, and it finally happened. We got it on tape. So
God, and I had it too.
But anyway, it's Christmas week. Christmas week, we're going to have a little special present for everybody out there. All Mountain. Now, This was not easy. Like, we've been here for a while trying to decide this. Want to just jump right into it, I guess?
Oh, man, I don't know any other way to do it.
It's been 3 hours.
Yeah, it's been 3 hours we've been working on this. So we're not going to make everybody happy, but we're going to try to do the best we can because this is tough. We'll just jump right into it. Coach of the Year. Our nominees for Coach of the Year were Pikeville's Chris McNamee, 14-0, led Pikeville to a Class A state championship. Johnson Central coach Jim Matney, 15-0, led Johnson Central to a Class 4A state title. Belfry's Philip Haywood, the all-time winningest coach in the state history, went 11-3 and led the Pirates to a Class 3A state title. Our other nominees were Joe Chirico from Paintsville, led the Tigers to the Class A state title game against Pikeville, and then Tug Valley's Haiti Ford, who, first year coming in, led them to the playoffs, and, they weren't supposed to do that. Josh, if you want to just kind of reveal who our coaches of the years are, and just maybe talk about how tough this vote was.
I mean, man, it was really hard, especially because we had 3 coaches win state titles, so it was like you can't really say that one state title means more than another, and all of them, especially Pikeville and Johnson Central, I think they both did undefeated. They go undefeated,
both of them. Yeah. So I mean, with that being said, we have a 3-way tie. We got Chris McNamee, Philip Haywood, and Jim Matney. I don't know if it's a cop-out, Steve, but I mean, we just couldn't decide. Like, we couldn't differentiate one state title. We couldn't say, well, this guy went undefeated. But then Belfry wasn't supposed to be there at the beginning of the year, if you hear some people talk.
Yeah.
Kept getting better. I mean, just talk about how these coaches is, because we really struggled with this decision.
Absolutely. All 3 of those guys and all 3 of those programs have unique situations. As you said, Coach Haywood really had a late push there with his Belfry Pirates. And, of course, for both Johnson Central and Pikeville to go undefeated, very tough schedules, and just to run the table. All 3 of those teams very deserving, and really each one wrote its own story during the season.
Yeah, we saw Chris McNamee win Coach of the Year from the Coaches Association, which is well-deserved. But, as we're doing this, we're covering all the teams, and, you're seeing what Matney's doing. A lot of people didn't give them a chance against Boyle County, Trevor, and, they come out and beat them 21-20 in a close game. Just kind of talk about that job Jim Matney did. You watched that team all year.
Yeah, and, and first off, we want to tell, all of our viewers that this was probably literally the most difficult
Oh yeah,
It was
all
packed.
the
It
way
was
to the
packed.
cross.
I mean, everybody was loaded, so it was a very difficult decision how we came about voting on all this. But yeah, Coach Matney, going down there and defeating Bull County. Bull County was the number one team in the state. There was the controversy, and I'm sure everyone's heard about the school official and what he said about people in Johnson County, and Johnson Central had that little chip on their shoulder going into that, and that they said they were going to win. Coach Matney, deep down, I know he knew they were going to win, and they went down there and they outlasted them 21-20. Just a great performance, and ended the year undefeated.
Yeah, and we're also not taking anything against Chirico or Haiti Ford either, but 3 state titles is unheard of. I mean, it's we're lucky enough sometimes to get a coach who wins a state title, but to have 3 in our coverage area. I mean, mountain football, really gets overlooked a lot of times, Steve. And this year, I don't think with how the playoffs were set up, people were expecting this at all.
I don't think so either, Andy. And you talked about that basically within a 60, 70-mile range there. We've got 3 state titles, and all 3 of those programs are just top from bottom to top, just loaded. And year in, year out, I mean, you're always talking about those teams in the equation. Pikeville able to get that title after finishing runner-up last year, and then Belfry returns to the top. Probably of the 3 has the most titles. Obviously, but Johnson Central made its 5th straight appearance as well. So that's all 3 of those teams really had everything going on full cylinders.
Yeah, and congrats again to our coaches, and we'll move right on to another tough decision. Player of the Year, and this was literally a 3-2 split for who won it. Our nominees, Pikeville's Jackson Hensley, Johnson Central's Riley Priest, Pikeville's Isaac McNamee, Tug Valley's Ethan Varney, and Johnson Central's Devin Johnson. And we talked about 10 more names who should have been on the list for Player of the Year.
Right.
Shelby Valley's Dalton Meade was the name that was mentioned. Isaac Dixon from Belfry was the name. I mean, John Collin was the name that was mentioned. I mean, we go down the line. There were so many guys we mentioned who could possibly be. But when the votes came down to it, Jackson Hensley picked it up 3-2 over his teammate Isaac McNamee. And, it was just a toss-up. Like, nobody really knew what to do. But what Pikeville did was, I think the McNamee-Hensley duo kind of stood out to everybody. And to me, I voted for Jackson Hensley because, what he did last year in the state title, having 2 touchdowns. Going out, I thought maybe, if he played last year, they win 2 back-to-back state titles. But then again, this year he has 2 catches, 2 touchdowns. I mean, just dynamic is what I thought about with Jackson Hensley. I think that's the decider.
Well, I mean, man, when you look at Jackson Hensley, you see nothing but a pure athlete at that position. Like, what's his build? I think he's like 6 foot something.
Yeah, he's over 6 foot, and he flies.
Yeah, that's his thing.
Well, then, and he can catch those balls underneath and take them to the house. Like, he doesn't have to always try to go for the deep ball.
Well, I mean, he scored touchdowns receiving, rushing, on punt returns, kick returns, a fumble return. I don't think he returned an interception, but just about any way you could score a touchdown, he scored it. And, he had that experience. He had that dynamic. And nothing taken away from Isaac McNamee, only a sophomore. And the future is bright for this kid. I mean, Steve, we watched this kid kind of come into his own this year, and he saw it all.
He really did, Randy. Turned it on, and really the second half of the season, I think, was really when he made a name for himself. Of course, the first-year starter, and all 5 of those players very deserving. I think with Jackson Hensley, the momentum for him really came in the offseason and kind of made a name for himself and got things going. But all 5 of those Player of the Year finalists, very deserving.
Yeah, and sometimes if you look at numbers, it's hard to differentiate between a quarterback, a wide receiver. I mean, they all have spectacular numbers. They're all spectacular players. There's no argument made. I couldn't say if somebody said Devin Johnson's our player of the year. I couldn't argue that.
Yeah. Right.
But, how we voted and how we felt today. And, if we would have done this yesterday, it might have been a different outcome. Or if we would have done it tomorrow, who knows? But, today Jackson Hensley is our player of the year. He's our All-Mountain player of the year for 2019. Congratulations, Jackson Hensley. I mean, a loaded Pikeville team, just kind of start to finish. He was the kid who, he was one of their leaders. And that also kind of stood out as well. Yeah. All right, and we'll just move on to the first team offense, and we'll start up front with the big guys. First name that we decided on was Peyton Blackburn for Shelby Valley. Andrew Clifton from Johnson Central, Grant Bingham from Johnson Central, Owen Master from Johnson Central, and Ethan Wolford from Belfry. I mean, up front, we got some talent up there. I mean, these guys can play. If you want to talk about some of the guys up front, Steve, and what these guys do, because a lot of stuff starts up there with the big guys up front.
Most definitely, Randy. And when you look at that group, you got 3 seniors, 2 sophomores, but 3 of the 5 from Johnson Central. Of course, Johnson Central as a collective unit rushes for well over 4,000 yards in a 15-game season. And when you look at the other 2 would be Peyton Blackburn from Shelby Valley, a player that really had a great offseason, as well as Ethan Wolford. He's a center at Belfry and really starts up front with him. He's been a captain of that Belfry offensive line for quite a long time.
Yeah, and, Trevor, you got to see this Johnson Central team a lot. Yeah. Just talk about what happens when that third quarter and fourth quarter rolls around when the opposing team has to go against this offensive line.
Well, I refer to Clifton as a quiet giant. Mm-hmm. He's the center. He snaps the ball. But they open those holes for the backs for Devin Johnson and for Priest and I'm telling you, you can drive a Mack truck through these holes that they open. And that's, like Steve said, the 4,000 yards rushing is just ridiculous. But those big guys up front for Central, that's one thing that Jim Matney and like Philip Haywood, they work tirelessly on is their offensive line, opening those holes up so those running backs can get through it. And nobody does it better than Johnson Central and Belfry.
Well, I think, in that state championship game against Boyle County, Johnson Central, they took a notion to go to that right side behind Bingham and LeMaster up there. Yeah. Just talk about how big that was because they went to that play over and over. And they would pull, Clifton would pull some too. I mean, just talk about how big that was, Trevor.
Well, at the start, Matney was not going to go away from what got him there. And he kept going to that side and, he wasn't going to leave the bread and butter. And those big guys, they were Devin Johnson and Priest, they were getting 2 and 3, 4 and 5 at a time. And Matney knew that he was just going to wear on them as the game went down, as it got later into the game. And those big guys just, they just kept wearing on Boyle County, wearing on them. And, Boyle County had the speed factor, I think. They were maybe quicker than Johnson Central. But like we were talking earlier, Johnson Central adjusted. And as the game went on, it's those big guys just pounding on you and wearing on you. And, Johnson Central started moving the ball.
Yeah. And then, Josh, we've talked to Peyton Blackburn a lot this year. And Josh has a little open challenge to Peyton Blackburn about having an Oklahoma drill or possibly even having a 40-yard dash. But this kid could possibly be in the Player of the Year, and nobody could argue. Josh, just kind of talk about what this kid brings, even though you want to challenge him.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. It says a lot about, the talent that you have as an offensive lineman when you can be brought up in the Player of the Year conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I mean, when we went and we've watched this kid several times this year, I know you've watched him more than I have, but all I've seen from him is like pure power, dude, and like his speed for that size, which is still not faster than me, but his speed for that size it's remarkable, dude. I think he probably runs like a 4.8, like a
probably a little bit quicker than that.
Oh, well, then he might be faster than
that. But when you see the kid and he's blocking in the second level, and then sometimes
he's up at the safety.
Yeah, so that's very rare to see. And then before the year started, Belfry. Everybody was questioning that offensive line. Ethan Wolford was the guy who, settled everything down. He was like, "Hey guys, we'll get there.
We're still Belfry.
Just calm down.
We're still Belfry."
And they got there. So, congratulations to all those guys up front. I mean, great job. Moving on to quarterback, first team quarterback, Isaac McNamee. I mean, he was our runner-up for Player of the Year. Had to throw him in first team quarterback. Just a phenomenal year. As a sophomore, sky's the limit. We've already talked about him. So we'll move on a little bit and go into our running backs. Our first running back that we had is Belfry's Isaac Dixon. You watch him in the state title game, that's all you need to know why he's first team running back.
I mean, dude's a home run hitter.
Yeah, that's 88 yards in the state title game, something like that, 3 touchdowns. Trevor, just dynamic. I mean, we say that word a lot this year. But it's kind of the theme, I guess, is that we've got a lot of dynamic players.
In Eastern Kentucky, we talk about smash mouth football, and nobody does it better than Belfry. And Dixon just he gets through the hole and he's gonna hit you. And he's
he'll make you miss too.
He's going downhill. Every time he touches.
He's got a lot of help in the backfield, and we debated having all three on the first team possibly.
Yep.
And that wouldn't have been outlandish at all. I don't think. I mean, but he was the only Belfry player that made first team running back. Moving on, speaking of dynamic, Cody Raines. All you have to say is the name now. Everybody, the Sports Center highlight number 4 off the state title
on
game.
The top 10.
Hurdled the kid. I mean, this kid, he had a phenomenal year, but he's in that Pikeville offense, and he kind of got overlooked a little bit here and there.
Well,
and just phenomenal player.
And I think that's mostly because Pikeville has so many
weapons.
Elite athletes like at the high school level, and it's ridiculous, especially in that receiving core. And when then we'll get to the linebackers in a second.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're probably about like 8 elite athletes deep on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I don't think that's an outlandish statement at all. I think that's probably about right. I might be
underselling
a little bit. Moving on, John Walker Phelps. Trevor, what a season! He had his flu game there in that Class A state semifinal.
This is who I want to hear.
Or was it the wrestling game? Was it the region final? I believe it was the region final against Racing.
Yeah.
Had his flu game, over 200 yards rushing. This kid was just the staple for that Paintsville offense.
John Walker was the Paintsville offense. He's another kid that, he's not an east-west runner. He's a north-south runner. When the ball came out of the backfield, 98% of the time, it was John Walker had it in his hands. He could also catch the ball, out in the flat and make a play. Tremendous athlete, quick. I remember talking to him the first of the year. And it was most of the Paintsville kids. They said we're the underdog, but we're going to the state championship. And that was every kid I talked to on that Paintsville team told me that. And lo and behold, there they were at the final. Now it wasn't the result that they wanted, but they were there. And that's that's the goal that they set at the first practice of the year, and they were there. John Walker Phelps, he's going to go to the next level.
He's the horse they rode in on too.
Absolutely,
really.
And in the state title game, they didn't have a whole lot of highlights, but when the game finishes, he's right around 100 yards against Pikeville, a good Pikeville defense that shut him out. But he was still moving the ball, and that just shows you what type of player John Walker Phelps was this year. And our last running back, and this was another tough decision. We didn't know whether to throw some players at running back or defense or what, but when it all settled, we said Matt Anderson deserved to be first-team running back. Just a freshman at Pikes, a big, I guess, house cat is what you would call it. You got to see him a couple times, and the kid, if you haven't watched the kid, go see it. Speed and power.
I'll tell y'all right now, I really hated seeing him doing it to my Tug Valley Panthers. But this kid ran wild. I'm pretty sure he broke some kind of record while he was over there. I think he rushed for 400 and some yards.
It was almost 400.
Yeah, it was almost 400. I literally watched this kid get gang tackled. Yeah, he was getting gang tackled by about 6 dudes. And literally it's like a cloud of dust, and then all you see is Matt Anderson just
dragging bodies.
He had 2 on his feet, and he was just picking them up as he ran. It was crazy, dude. He literally is. I don't even know how to put this. He's kind of like an anomaly.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect a guy his size to be a running back.
Yeah.
But he reminds you a lot of Jerome Bettis or somebody like that. If I'm picking a pro player,
power and speed. Yeah. And moving on to the wide receivers, our first selection was. Johnson Central, Seth Dalton. Now, Steve, this is a team that doesn't throw the ball a lot, but when they do, just talk about what Seth Dalton can do out there on the outside edge.
Probably one of the most underrated players in our area. And Seth is a kid that missed all of the 2018 season with a freak injury he had there in the preseason, but started as a sophomore to go back a couple of years, started that sophomore season, missed his junior campaign, then comes back this year. Trevor, I think he finished with 700-plus yards.
Yeah, and like Randy said, that was that was the thing about Johnson Central. Riley Priest, the quarterback, was back there. At the end of the night, you'd go to the stat sheet and you would see Riley was 2 for 3 or 4 for 5, 4 for 6. He didn't throw the football a whole lot, but Dalton was his main target. And but Riley's stats would be 2 for 3 with 2 touchdowns. Anytime he threw the ball to Dalton, he was going to the end zone. Dalton had really sure hands, good speed. Caught it in open space and he was gone. And like Steve said, definitely in my mind one of the most underrated players in our area.
Yeah, and moving on, our second wide receiver, Pike Central's Keegan Bentley. This kid, he had a big year for Pike Central.
He's a gamer, Randy.
A gamer. They don't throw the ball a whole lot, but when they do, it's usually to Keegan Bentley, and he usually does something with the ball.
Oh, he's going to come down with it. If it's a 50-50 ball, I think he's going to come down with it.
He's got good size, he's strong, he's quick, and great hands. I mean, this kid had a phenomenal season. When you thought about this Pike Central team, you thought about Tyler Hunt and Matt Anderson on offense. Well, he was kind of the forgotten guy, but when he got the ball, everybody got on to him quick. You figured out who he was really, really quickly.
Well, and he was also another one of those dudes that we were questioning whether or not we should put him on defense or offense because he was a ball hawk on defense.
Yeah,
Kid just loves the ball, man, and if it's coming his way, he's going to try and catch it.
Yeah, and you sometimes you see a lot of player of the year lists, and those list guys too. We try to, once you make one, we'll settle you there. So just for people who don't realize, we want to get as many people as we can on here. We got a lot of talented players. So if you make one team, we're not going to put you on offense, or you're either going to be on offense or defense. So just to clear that up before we. But another kid you got, Drew Hatfield, could have easily been a player of the year. And his stats are all-time great. I mean, just talk about this kid, and I know you've got to sit a lot and have a lot of conversations with this kid.
Well, man, honestly, he's probably one of the most intellectual kids I've talked to at that age. He's so smart, especially when he talks about sports. When he talks about sports, it's a completely different kind of conversation than when you're just actually talking to him. But, I mean, you go and you look and you watch him on the field, and Go Central does a lot of bubble screens and stuff like that, but it's because they want to get the ball in this dude's hands quick. Because he's got that speed to make a big play out of nothing. So, I mean, when you look at him, his route running, especially once he gets to the second and third level of routes where he's running digs and posts and streaks and corners and all that stuff, it's super clean and super crisp. I think the one play that sticks out to me about him is against Winfield. They were down there, and he had a 97-yard touchdown reception where he ran a wheel route down the sideline and was double covered and goes up over 2 dudes and grabs this thing, man, and then changes direction and goes 97 yards to the house, or 99 maybe. I don't know. I might be wrong.
Yeah,
don't hate me, Drew.
Just an all-time West Virginia wide receiver.
One of the best ever to do it in the state of West Virginia.
But he also nationally as well. He's up top 5 in a lot of categories. So great year. Congrats to Drew Hatfield. But our last wide receiver, and this was another tough one. We had about 5 names for one spot, and when the dust settled, we put in stats and we factored a lot of stuff into this. So when it all settled, our last wide receiver was Karsten Paul. And you got to see Poe a lot at Paintsville. I mean, just another dynamic receiver.
He really was, and Paintsville's quarterback Jake Hyden, another great athlete, could have been on that list as well.
Right.
But when Jake would throw the ball, he was like Priest and Dalton. That was Karsten was his main target. Karsten's another kid, really good hands, quick. Could take a hit. Could deliver a hit, but he found the end zone quite a bit, for Hyden, and Hyden would look for him a lot across the middle. Poe's he'll be back. I'm pretty sure. So Paintsville's got a lot of good juniors. Coach Chirico told me down at the state championship coming back. So but Poe, he could have been on that first team.
Yeah. And our first team tight end, this is the only time you're going to see us take a tight end. Zach Russell from Johnson Central, Steve. Kid got size, speed. He's really got it all. I mean, just kind of talk a little bit about him.
He really does, Randy. Size, speed, great hands for a kid his size. And Zach's another player that early in the season battled through a few injuries but got on track and really didn't miss any time on the field as a result. Very little, if any. But big-time target, a junior. He's drawing a lot of interest from colleges and
just an imposing
He
player.
really is. If you want to, he's a prototypical tight end.
Yeah. Yeah, and now we'll move on. We got 3 athletes. Our first one on the first team, Ethan Varney from Tug Valley. Josh, just kind of tell everybody how explosive this kid was.
Well, man, you look at him, and he's a first-year quarterback. He hasn't played the position his whole time in high school playing football. Coach Ford comes in, puts him at quarterback, and nobody really expects him to do anything. But then he kind of just explodes and, throws for almost 3,000 yards or a little over 3,000 yards and then rushes for 1,000 and then has, 30-some touchdowns. Come on, dude. You're not supposed to do that. But you did it anyway, Ethan, and we're proud of you.
And our next athlete, Riley Priest from Johnson Central. Trevor, what can't this kid do on the field? Quarterback, he can run it, he can throw it, and, secondary, he's one of the best ball hawks around. I mean, just talk about, athlete is, I think, a perfect place for him.
You could give Riley Priest a shuffleboard, and he would be one of the best in the state at it. The kid is just amazing. I mean, he was the quarterback. He was the punter. He was the one, like you said, played defensive back and had, multiple interceptions, took him to the house.
Had a couple pick sixes.
Yeah, he surely did.
I love that analogy.
He was, one of the players of the year in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
The kid is just an all-around, possibly could be one of probably the most complete athlete in Eastern Kentucky. Led Johnson Central to a state championship his freshman year, and then capped his senior season off with another state championship. He has video game numbers, but the kid just, he's a storybook, man. He really is, and he's perfect position on this list.
And I think our final athlete on the first team is Dalton Mead, another perfect athlete for this. He ran the ball as a quarterback, nearly rushed for 2,000 yards. I think he was maybe 50-some to 100-some yards short. Played defense. He was a safety, second tackle, interceptions, played hurt. This kid was a trooper. I mean, he was just a tough leader. Could have very well been a player of the year any year, and nobody could have complained. Just a great kid, and, he's drawn a lot of interest from some colleges. He's going to make a very good football player for somebody at that next level.
He's super tough.
Super tough, and just a leader. I mean, he was hurt. He had the Cam Newton injury where his bones were separated in his foot.
Liz Frank injury.
The Liz Frank, and he still went out there and played and started in the playoffs to be with his teammates. Ran for 30 yards and he shouldn't have been walking. He was in a bulldog wag. But in our last player for offensive first team, the kicker, Johnson Central's Jay Kedley. This kid just is a dynamic kicker. I mean, I think that's about all we can say. I mean, he was just accurate. He could kick from distance. He could do it all. I mean, just a great soccer player, too, and you'll see his name on our soccer list as well.
Well, and I'll tell you this. Kicker might be one of the most underrated positions in all of Eastern Kentucky. So, I mean, I don't know how many times this year we've seen a kicker win big games for some teams.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, and so, in the state championship, that one came down to an extra point, and Headley was perfect. One thing, quick before we move on, not a lot of teams in our area work with a kicker, but I noticed that Jim Matney, at every practice and before every game, he would have Headley line up at the 10 and kick, and he would move him back 10, and he would move him back 10 yards every single time until he missed. And sometimes he would get back to the 40, and this kid's booting it. It was just unreal. But that kid, he was deadly.
All right, that wraps up our first team. We're back at his first team defense time, and again, a lot of tough decisions, a lot of talent. This is not easy. We really put a lot of thought into it. Some people may say, well, they just threw whoever in there. No, we actually discussed this stuff for a while. But just kicking off, first team defense, we're starting with defensive line, Grayson Cook. When I think of Grayson Cook, it's just speed up front. And he could play safety if he wanted to, but he's been on the defensive line all year. One of the quickest defensive ends, gets to the quarterback, wraps people up, long and quick, and he is mean up there too. He likes to hit people.
Well, and his awareness too, man, is game changing. Because if you remember that time we were watching him play, I forget the team they were playing.
Floyd Central.
But he got his hands up, and when that ball went straight up in the air, Birchfield was right there to come up with the interception. But it was all because of a Cook swap.
Yeah. He's the type of player who could have easily been in the Player of the Year discussion and won it. Signed with Air Force just this morning.
Going to play linebacker
and play. And speaking of somebody who signed, Devin Johnson from Johnson Central, another player who was in our Player of the Year finalists. Could have put him at running back. He could have put him at linebacker. Defensive line is where we put him because he likes to rush the ball. Steve, just talk about this guy. To me, when I think of Devin Johnson, I think of speed and power.
Devin is one of those kids that he was a great running back, but he's not a great sized kid. But man, what the kid's got in determination and heart, which is something you can't teach. On the defensive side of the ball, he's a great defensive end. Mm-hmm. But when Johnson hit you, believe me, the next play, whoever had the ball, they were looking for him. Yeah. Because I watched him hit some kids this year, and I mean,
he's a game changer.
It was jarring their teeth. So and like you said, Randy, he could have been on.
Could have been running back easily. He
really
rushed for 1,600 yards.
Yeah.
And, our next name, Jalen Allen. Steve, we've covered this guy for years now since he's a freshman. Signed with Eastern. Going to probably play linebacker at the next level. We put him on defensive line, but, I mean, there's no wrong place to put him. But up front, he was a nightmare for people.
And he's another kid, Randy, that, like you said, you could play a couple different positions, and he's produced throughout his career. And like you say, he signed with Eastern Kentucky, and he'll have a chance to play collegiately at the FCS level.
Yeah, and just a great player, outstanding, great kid. And then our final defensive lineman on first team, Pike Central's Nate Roberts, another kid who's a linebacker most of the time, goes up front and creates havoc. I mean, I think that's for our first team defense, defensive line, I think havoc is the perfect word because these kids are quick, they're big, they're strong, they all tackle well. I mean, they do it all.
And something else when you look at these names, like something that stands out to me is their gap control. Mm-hmm. Like the way they control where they want the ball to go. Like a really good linebacker is able to dictate where that running back is going to go, and he can force that running back to go wherever he so chooses him to go.
Yeah, and now we're moving on to linebackers, and our first, when we think of linebackers, the name I think of is John Collum. This kid will hit you, and when he does, a lot of teams don't want to get hit by John Collum the second time after they get hit the first time. This kid could have, like we talked about him for Player of the Year, honestly. I mean, he was a name we seriously consider for Player of the Year. And he's just a game changer in my book. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and he's mean, and he likes to hit people. Like, he doesn't say a whole lot on the field, off the field, but when he gets on the field, he's all business. So, I mean, to me, he was our standout linebacker of all. And this kid is just a phenomenal player. I'm sure somebody's going to jump on him for the next level. This kid, and if they don't, they're missing out. This kid is a player. Our second linebacker, Belfry Seth Mounts, another kid who likes to hit people, quick, covers the field. He can do it all. I mean, Steve, just to kind of talk about this kid because, he's one of those, if you wear number 5 and you're a Belfry linebacker, you're doing something.
He's another player, Randy. Like you said, he can really produce, and that's a kid that'll hit you too, but really well at covering ground. That's the thing I think that really jumps out about him to me is the way he covers the field. And he's another typical linebacker, like you said. He likes to hit people, and really his production is just off the charts.
And another, after moving on from Seth Mounts, Hunter McLeod at Johnson Central. I mean, another kid who could have been, first Player of the Year, honestly. I mean, the kid over 100 tackles. He's another guy who likes to hit people. Trevor, just talk about his impact with this Johnson Central defense. I mean, it seems like him and Devin Johnson are just nightmares that you don't want to, the opposing defenses don't want to say.
And those two together, oh wow! I mean, those two equal pain. Mm-hmm. On the defensive side of the ball. Hunter was always, wherever the ball was, Hunter was in that vicinity somewhere. The kid was versatile. I mean, I saw him run the ball some this year. He played defensive back a little bit this year. He played everywhere. But, man, he's quick. He's another one, athlete, baseball player. He does a little bit of everything. But, man, he can lower the boom on you. From that linebacker spot.
Laying the boom, another player moving on, Brees Fletcher from Hazard. Broke Hazard's all-time tackling record. That right there should just tell you all you need to know about this kid. There's been so many good players over the years at Hazard, so many good linebackers, so many good defensive players. He's the all-time leading tackler on that team, and this kid is just consistent. He's always in the spot where he needs to be. He's always around the ball. He doesn't miss tackles, and he's another athlete who plays offense. He runs the ball. He catches the ball. He plays special. He does a little bit of everything. Plays basketball. I mean, this kid's all over the place. And then moving on, Pfeiffel's Caden Cottle, another linebacker who does everything. He led Pfeifel in tackles this year, and that's saying something on that Pfeifel team.
Especially with how stacked they are.
And we've talked about how good those linebackers are all year, and we didn't get Connor Wright on the first time. We didn't get Brody Birchfield for Pfeifel on the first. Like, that's how good these linebackers are to keep kids like that to the second team. I mean, these players are they're all outstanding linebackers, and we had hard choices here. Like, we had about 7-8 names at linebacker that we talked about, but now we're going back to the first team for the secondary. Our first name comes up is Belfry's Isaiah Birchfield. Just a ball hawk. Josh Bean, you got to watch him a few times. Interceptions, and sometimes they wouldn't even look to the side of the field to throw.
I swear, man, I loved watching that kid play because, I watched teams test him game in, game out, and every time they did, they failed.
Mm-hmm.
He would always outjump the receiver. Now, he's only about 5'8", 5'9", something like probably not. 5'9" is probably too tall for him. But I mean, Zay, you can jump, bro. You got hops. Just
he's athletic.
Keep letting people underestimate you, and
he also hits people too.
Oh,
don't get that wrong. This kid will hit you. Our second secondary player, Peyton Boyd Blair for Pfeifel. I think he led Pfeifel with interceptions, and in that backfield, in that secondary, you had names like Jackson Hensley, Cody Raines, Seth Pugh. I mean, the list is phenomenal.
Athlete.
And he had more interceptions than them all. So, just a great year. And then moving on, Devin Hall from Paintsville, Trevor. I mean, this kid is another kid who is just a ball hawk. I mean, just talk about what he does.
He really was, Randy. He's one of those kids when the ball goes up, he's like a center fielder. He's out there looking for. He had a bunch of interceptions this year. Absolutely hit you. And he would just jar your shoulder pads. It was a great defensive player for Paintsville this year. He helped lead them to that state title game in Class A. And he just a leader on that defense. He really was for Coach Chirico.
And our final first team all-defense selection, Johnson Central's Cody Rice. Now, Steve, this is a kid we could have put on offense, defense. Just kind of talk about what he does. But that backfield was loaded. That secondary was loaded again for Johnson Central, excuse me. But just talk about what Cody Rice did.
He just tremendous athlete, Randy. He drew the tough chore there in the state championship game, had to defend Reese Smith, of course, signed with West Virginia today. So that in itself just tells you what type of player Cody Rice is. And a senior for Johnson Central, but he really, this season, really produced from the opening game until the final one. And he was really one of the glue guys in that secondary.
Yeah. All right, we're back. We're going to talk about our second team offense now. We'll just run through this a little bit quicker than we have. We won't go as in depth, but we'll go offensive line. We selected Paintsville's John Blackburn, Tug Valley's Jared Webb, Pikeville's Matt Compton, Pikeville's Cade Slater, Hazard's Dalton Strong. Steve, like all these names, one of the names that, me and you both got to watch was Dalton Strong, a great kid up front for that Hazard team. Really, started a lot of stuff up front for them.
He did, Randy. He really was the guy up front that got a lot of that rushing attack going, good pass coverage. And he's an offensive lineman. A lot of times you look at offensive line, you want to look at the guys that can move downfield. He moves well in space, and he's the guy that really made a lot of things go up front.
Yeah, that Hazard team had a great year. They played Pikeville Strong in that playoff game, and Dalton Strong, that name says it all. He was good up front. He helped set the tone for Reese Fletcher and Mason Collins run the ball. And moving on to our second team quarterback, a guy you got to see a lot of, Dalen Gold, just likes to throw the ball.
Man, no, he did have close.
He likes to run the ball too.
Yeah, he had close to 1,000 yards rushing too. I mean, but when I think about Day, it's mostly his arm. Like, he can sit in the pocket and he can make about every throw.
Yeah.
Like, that's very noticeable whenever you watch him play. When he runs the ball, It's very powerful style of running. Like, he doesn't really try to juke or anything like that. Like, which is really odd for a quarterback to not try to avoid
He just
contact.
wants to run somebody
Yeah,
off.
he's just going to try to, like, he's going to make you not want to tackle him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is, I mean, it's not counterproductive as a good quarterback. It's
Yeah, and that he's another one of those names we could have had first team or even player of the year candidate with his numbers, but just how it fell this year. There's so much competition.
Man, that's just so tough.
There's so many
was a lot of
players,
good
and
quarterbacks this
that's not
year.
a slight to Dalen Gold.
No, not at all.
To me, that means he can play if he made second team. But moving on to our running backs, second team running backs, we had Phelps's Dominic Francis, Belfry's Peyton Hensley, Johnson Central's Dylan Preston, and Shelby Valley's Jaden Newsom, who is the only freshman on that list. But Peyton Hensley's another name that stood out to everybody here. Peyton Hensley had a huge regular season for this Belfry team, led them in rushing, and really set the tone as the fullback.
I mean, dude, when I think of Peyton, he's like the perfect opportunist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he didn't get as many carries as Dixon or Ben Bentley, but he made the most of every carry that he got as the fullback, and I think that shows because he put up over 1,000 yards, just like his two counterparts.
He's the guy running up the middle for Belfry. He's the setup guy. He's the guy doing the 3 yards, the 4 yards, and setting the edges for Bentley or Dixon. Like, he's the guy. Without him, those guys don't have their success.
Well, and he's the type of kid, man. He'll break like an 80-some yard touchdown run, and then you'll see him on the sideline running sprints down the sideline.
Yeah,
like he's that kind of kid.
Yeah, he's just one of those kids that you love to have on your team. Phenomenal year. That's why we had him at running back this year. And now we're going on to our wide receivers for second time. Hazard's Andrew Ford, Pifle's Seth Pugh, Pifle's Clay Tinsley, Tug Valley's Caleb May. I mean, the two names that we really talked about for the first team were Seth Pugh and Clay Tinsley. They pretty much had identical numbers for this Pifle team. I think they both had 30 catches. Yardage was just a few off. Touchdowns, I think, were almost identical. Two dynamic players, and Steve, for Pikeville to have 4 wide receivers, that they can go to at any time, and any of them make a play, it's hard to overlook that.
It really is, Randy. Talk about versatility when you go to key on a guy. You can't really key on 1 or even 2 with that Pikeville passing attack, and really kept defenses on their toes. Of course, Pugh is a guy that's been there for a while, and then Tinsley transferred in over the offseason, and he just added to that offensive.
Yeah, he was a perfect slot receiver in that offense. Came up with some big catches and broke some big plays too. Like, he could make you miss and make a play. Whereas Seth Pugh came up huge against Belfry, had 2 touchdowns in that game, and he was more of a deep threat than a Tinsley. But both of them are outstanding players. And we'll move on to our athletes. Pike Central's Tyler Hunt, quarterback. He could do it all. He could throw it. He could run it. You look in the box score, some games he might throw for 300 yards. Some games he might rush for 200 yards. You look, he might have an interception or 2 on defense. He might have 10 tackles. This kid can do it all. So athlete was a perfect spot. Another perfect spot for a quarterback, Paintsville's Jake Hayden. Trevor, just talk about Jake Hayden. I mean, he's another kid, offense and defense, could really do it all.
Yeah, I think he had like 6 interceptions on the year, plus he was the quarterback, so he was the general of that offense. He missed 2 games due to injury, but he was right back out there. He ran that offense, to the T. I mean, he got him.
Yeah, and he was one of those names we talked about for first team. I mean, you're going to hear us saying that a lot. You might even be hearing us saying that about our third team guys, but he was one of those guys in the discussion for first team, just like our other athlete, Belfry's Ben Bentley. I mean, you could have put him on the first team running back and not had that argument there. You could put him on defense on first team and not had an argument. But, we thought athlete was a perfect spot for him because he could do a little bit of everything. And, that he's one of these other kids who's got a future ahead of him. He's going to go to Youngstown State, sign today. I mean, you've got to talk to him. I mean, just kind of talk about the kid he is and the type of athlete he is as well.
I mean, man, as an athlete, I think it's pretty clear that he's at the elite level. He can play safety I've seen him walk down and play a little bit of slot corner before as a running back. I mean, he's explosive, but the thing to me is the fact that, like, he doesn't let just one dude bring him down. Like, he's looking to fight for those yards. Yep. Like, he's not going to shy away from contact, but he's not afraid to make you look silly either. If like you take a wrong angle, he's going to break those ankles.
Yes.
So,
He's also one of the best blocking.
A blocking run.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
he will
I
block.
wanted to touch on that too. I've
And he
seen
takes
him
pride
lay
in his
some
blocking,
people
yeah.
out.
He
bro.
takes pride in his blocks too, because that game against DeSales, he had a key block for Dixon on that 2-point conversion. Just a great athlete there, and he could do it all. I mean, he got a bright future ahead of him. I mean, just a tremendous
He's super
season.
funny too. Like he's just like he's a good interview.
Yeah.
I liked him today.
He was an integral part in that Belfry success this year. And our final second team offensive player is at kicker, Pikeville's Tanner Hamilton. I mean, kicking sometimes plays the difference in a win or loss. And early in the season, Pikeville played Paintsville. The score was 9-8. Paintsville was up 8-6. Tanner Hamilton hit a field goal in the third quarter that turned out to be the difference. But Pikeville's defense held, but that's so important because it wins or loses. That you take that away, Pikeville might have a loss on the record.
Yeah, what if they didn't have a guy that could kick it, 35, 40 yards?
Yeah, I mean, it's just shows how important that is. And we'll just move right into defense. Defensive line second team, Belfry's Jacob Baisden, Tug Valley's Grayson Spalding, Belfry's Dylan Goff, and Johnson Central's Braden Castle. Just kind of talk about Braden Castle there, Steve, for this Johnson Central team. I mean, that offensive line, we said we could put the whole offensive line on first team and not have an argument, and we got another kid on the second team here.
He's a defensive lineman, Randy, that could really good at the run stop. I think he played big throughout the season, and whenever you're a defensive lineman, especially you're those interior guys, and you're putting up a lot of tackles, and you're doing your job, because a lot of times with those defensive schemes, whatever they might be, you might have responsibility, and you might not be the
dude
guy
that's supposed to make the
Yeah. And then we'll just move right on to the linebackers. Our linebackers for second team, Pikeville's Connor Wright, Shelby Valley's Braden Keithley, Hazard's Mason Collins, Tug Valley's Zach Savage, and Johnson Central's Mason LeMaster. Trevor, you saw Mason LeMaster quite a bit. I mean, just talk about what he added with the Devin Johnsons and the Hunter McLeods, because, honestly, he has talent as well.
Well, you and I talked earlier in the year that, Pikeville and Johnson Central probably had the best linebacker core in our coverage area. Mason was, he was another one. He and Devin and Hunter McLeod back there, man, they roamed the middle, and man, they were just, like you said earlier, a nightmare for people. Mason, he fired off the ball. When Matney would call for a blitz, man, you could just, you could see him coming. You see just a quick kid, got off the ball. He would hit you hard. I'm pretty sure he recovered a couple fumbles this year. So he really did. Yeah, he did in the state championship game. Came up with that big fumble. And, he's just another kid. It's an athlete,
Yeah, and like you said, we were talking about Pikeville. Connor Wright's a name on our second team who could easily be in first team. I mean, this kid, he got to the ball, he brung people down, and he still finished. He played in an All-Star game over the weekend, a senior All-Star game, and he's that type of talent to where he's as good as anybody, but there's only so many spots, and second team, and this is a kid who. As good as you'll see in Eastern Kentucky at the linebacker position.
And again, that's the thing we want to stress again, that this is an unusual year. Any other year, these guys that are on second and third team, man, we're talking about some of these kids for Player of the Year.
Yeah.
This was just a really, an unusual year for us to pick this. It took us over, like Corey said, 3
the
hours.
mountains is loaded with talent, pretty much, is what this comes down to, man.
In our second team secondary, Shelby Valley's Jesse Cook, Mingo Central's Devin Hatfield, Mingo Central's Preston Dingus, and Hazard's Max Johnson. Devin Hatfield, probably could have had him at receiver if we wanted to. Probably could have put him in, but as a young player, find your I guess your feet on defense is really key. Just talk about the season that he had.
Well, when you watch Devin play, and when you can look at his stats, he's probably not going to have a lot of interceptions. But that's because he's getting a lot of deflections, and he's around the receiver a lot. Like, hardly ever do you see him get burnt deep or anything like that. So I think the best thing about Devin's defense is the fact that he doesn't really let most things by him. Like, and he's not afraid to come up and hit. Like, this kid's competitive. Like, if he sees somebody on his team hit somebody hard, he wants to hit that same kid harder than his teammate did. Like, that's the kind of, like player we're talking about when you talk about Devin. Just super athletic. He's going to chase down any ball in the air and at least get a hand on it.
Yeah. All right, we're back. We got our third team offense and defense to go through. Steve, we'll let you go through real quickly and just kind of read off the names. I know people are probably tired of us breaking down every single player, but just kind of read the third team offense.
Third team offense, we'll start from the offensive line. Sean Cochran of Belfry, Jackson Mullins of Pikeville, Adam Johnson of Shelby Valley, Hunter Scott of Johnson Central, Aiden Smith of Belfry. Quarterback is Brett Coleman of Belfry. Running backs are Ethan Bentley of Shelby Valley, Mason Rice of Perry Central, Dalton Boyd of Floyd Central, and Austin Taggart of Betsy Lane. Wide receivers, Zach Lockhart of Pikeville, Cade Miller of Perry County Central, Cameron Fugit of Perry County Central, and then the athletes we got one other wide receiver, Sean Howell of Betsy Lane. Athletes are Chase Mims of Betsy Lane, Harris Phelps of Paintsville, and Issa Scales of Mingo Central.
Yeah, and that puts us on the defense, Trevor, if you want to read off the third team defense.
Yeah, and we'll start with the defensive lineman on the third team. We're going to get the first defensive lineman is Hunter Oosley from Paintsville High School, Josh Taylor from Pikeville, Curtis Robinette from Betsy Lane, and Adrian Anthony from Pike Central. Go to the linebacker spots. We got Brody Birchfield from Pikeville. We have Mason Lovely from McGoffin County, Ryan DeBoard from Mingo Central, Jeremy Taylor from East Ridge, and Luke Hyden from Paintsville. The cornerback spots, we've got Trajon Campbell from Hazard, Tyrell Hollis from Phelps. We got Brandon Evans from Floyd Central, and we'll round out the list with Grant Rice from Johnson Central.
All right. All right, we're back once again. Josh, no clap that time after you failed so bad? That's still pathetic.
Typically my claps are really loud. Like, I don't know what
I don't
it is.
believe it. I don't believe it.
It's got to be the lotion I used this morning. It's got my hands soft.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, we're back, and, we got a whole list of honorable mentions, and, we won't read them off. Corey will do a good job and put all their names up. They'll be in the newspapers as well, so, we'll have plenty of opportunity to see the honorable mention. Nothing wrong with being an honorable mention this year. I mean, some really awesome players are you'll see up there for honorable mention.
It's been a good year for sports.
Absolutely, a great year for football. So, Steve, if you want to start off our just kind of talk about our player of the year for soccer, and we'll list the players a year, but I'll let you lead off the coach of the year and player of the year.
For boys soccer, as we had to spoil it with the girls, it was a Prestonsburg sweep. For the boys soccer player of the year is Matt Burchett. Coach of the year is Brad Burchett. Matt Burchett was a player, Randy, that really came on strong this season, led the Black Cats and captured the region title. And he was the guy that really led the Black Cats in a couple different categories and was a player that anytime he was on the field, you had to account for him if you're the opposing coach. And, of course, the coach of the year, Brad Burchett, is the Prestonsburg head coach and really has brought that program to prominence here in just a short amount of time.
Yeah, and Prestonsburg, I think that's 2 straight region titles for them. Just a great season for them, and coach of the year, player of the year shows what they did. Josh, you got girls coach of the year and player of the year.
Keeping it with the last name Burchett, we're going to have Anna and Paul. Now, Anna won player of the year. Pretty sure she broke some records this year.
As a freshman.
Yeah, which is absolutely crazy. Good job, Anna. And then we've got Paul Burchett.
Coach of the year for Prestonsburg.
Yeah.
They've won so many region titles down there now. I think that's 2 in a row for them as well. Prestonsburg had another big year. A lot of talent. Michaela Oosley was down there. Elizabeth Burchett, Anna's older sister, she was injured. She would have been a great player of the year as well, but Anna, she kind of stood out this year. And moving on, All Mountain Volleyball. Trevor, you got player of the year and coach of the year.
Yeah, I sure do. And I don't think it was much of a surprise here, but our player of the year was Pikeville's Kaylee Wales. Kaylee was dominant, I think, about all year for Pikeville. She's,
A killer at the net.
she really, really is. Hits it a ton. And, the coach of the year was Darlene Moore from Floyd Central. They won the region title, went to the state. I think that's well deserved.
The third year of the school, I mean, that's almost unheard of. Floyd Central's made the region semifinal or final, all three years. In the finals. Finally won one. And Kaylee Wells, if you haven't seen her play volleyball, she hits a ton. She gets up. I mean, she can do a little bit of everything, but she was clearly the leader of that Pikeville team. And I think they probably had the most wins in the region of anybody, and a lot of that success was because of Kaylee up front.
And the All-A Classic champion.
So congratulations to our All-Mountain Soccer boys and girls, and our volleyball teams as well. We'll be wrapping this one up. Everybody out there, have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. We'll be back soon.